call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Let's go. I'm about to go off like a weapon. Fuel to the top, got a filled up engine. In my thoughts obsession, I will not stop, no I'm never second.
Welcome back, everybody. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. And now that we finally officially hired Vic Fangio as our defensive coordinator, I wanted to discuss what we're actually going to be getting with that guy. And we're not underselling it. I mean, the guy is a mastermind of defense, and we are going to be getting a legitimate contender defense from here on out. Every single team that he's been on, they've gotten to the top 10, and there's reasons for it. We're going to describe basically what he runs as a defense and how and why he probably chose the Dolphins and how it fits him. So we're going to get right into it. Vic Fangio runs a 3-4, which basically what that means is you have 3 down defensive linemen, which means hands in the dirt, and then you have 4 linebackers. You have a Mike, a Will, a Sam, and sometimes a Jack linebacker. And he runs that base of that formation. And what he also does is he has a 2 safety formation, and most of the time 2 cornerbacks, depending on what the offense is doing. So what he tries to run is essentially something that does not allow really big pass plays or anything, down the field for a lot of yardages. And it makes the quarterback have to dissect the defense every time that they play it. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop any big plays from happening and just only allow the quarterback to just step by step move down the field, which honestly, if you're a quarterback that just likes to make throws and doesn't really like to read defenses very well, you don't do well against Vic Fangio's defense. So what that brings is that you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to understand what you're seeing very quickly, because what he likes to do is he likes to have something shown where it looks like a cover 2 most of the time, or it looks like something else, maybe a cover 3 or a cover 4, and he will move right when you snap the ball the defenders into a different spot to show a different type of coverage. So basically what's happening is while you have that 5 seconds of people rushing you, you have to understand, okay, it's not this coverage anymore, it's a different coverage completely, and break it down and know where the open guy is going to be. And that's why it was so successful, is that most of the time it's really hard to break down what he's trying to do. What Vic Fangio likes to run is a 3-4, and he likes to run a 4-0-4 gap technique, which essentially is you have the center, you have the left and right guards, and you have the left and right tackles and the tight end. So on the outside of the center is the 1 gap, and then in between the center and the guard is the 2 gap. In between the guard and the tackle is the 3 gap. Left tackle is 5, and then 6 and 7 and 8 is around the tight end. So essentially what he likes to do is he likes to have 1 defensive tackle on the center. You have 2 defensive linemen that are in the 4 gap, so in between the guard and the tackle. And then usually we'll have like a linebacker on the 7 gap around the tight end or something along those lines. So essentially what you're doing is, what he tries to do is allow his defensive linemen to eat up the blocks so that his outside linebackers or his pass rushers have one-on-one advantage. And he tries to teach a technique that allows him to take advantage of the one-on-ones, and that's what he goes for. He doesn't blitz. He just makes sure he has players that are going to win these one-on-ones, allow the defensive lineman to eat up most of the blocks, and have a one-on-one pass rush, and hopefully win those. Essentially what that means is he has very, very much so gap integrity on most of his plays. So what he will try and do is the defensive lineman will have certain gaps that they have to cover and take on certain blocks. The linebackers will have that as well. And then what he likes to do is take 2 safeties, keep them as 2 high safeties, but then move them once the snap is he'll move them into a Tampa 2, he'll move them into a cover 3, he'll move them into a cover 4. He plays a lot of zone coverage. And what that does is he'll have people over the top to not allow the deep plays, and he'll have underlying zone coverage. And what he'll also like to do is you have assignments when you're going to zone. So some people, they'll put zone where it's just like you sit in this area and you wait. What he likes to do and where it disguises people is he he will also have people looking like man coverage, following the player until it's outside their zone and essentially passing it off to the next zone coverage player. So you're not going to have those where they allow the person to just get in your zone and have that quick release. It's more so that they follow you when you're in their zone and then they push you off. And there's assignments to the zones where not only do you have the zone, but you have this guy right now for your zone. So it's not like you're just sitting back here moving into a zone coverage. You have a guy designated for you, and then when that guy moves out of your zone, then you have another guy. So it's basically like a linebacker or something playing that inside zone. You will have the first off the slot receiver, and then maybe the running back. That'll be your assignments for that play. And you'll follow that receiver, pass him off to the next zone if he goes out of your zone, and then move to the running back while he's coming down to the flat or whatever it is. In a nutshell, what the coverage will be. Now, what he tries to do with the defensive line is he essentially tries to allow his defensive linemen to eat up blocks. He needs athletic defensive linemen, which we do have. We have, Emmanuel Ogbah, Christian Wilkins, we have Zach Sealer, big guys that are athletic that can eat up blocks. And then what you do is you put your outside linebacker, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips. This is why it was perfect for him to come here. And you run that 3-4 where the outside linebacker are on the 7 gap or the 9 gap, and you allow them to take on either the tight end or just the right tackle. And while you are mixing up the defense to show a different coverage and the quarterback is trying to break it down, you have your outside linebacker or your pass rusher blitzing, or not blitzing, but taking on a one-man gap where if he wins, he's getting to the quarterback. And that's essentially how he has a pass rush. Is what you're trying to do is he is trying to show the quarterback something, and then when you hike it, move the guys into a different coverage so that you might not be able to throw to the same guy you thought you were going to throw to. And then while that is happening, the defensive linemen are eating up blocks, and you're going to have essentially Bradley Chubb or Jalen Phillips take on one-on-ones. And if they win, they get a sack. And that's how he tries to run his defense. And then what you're trying to do as well is having people down the field so that there are no big plays that are going to happen. So the difference between Brian Flores' defense and Josh Boyer and this defense is what Brian Flores would like to do is he basically had 80-90% of the time he would do man coverage and would blitz. So what he would try and do is blitz so many people that there's a gap left open so that you can't block everybody. And he would hope and, get his players to, and that's why he filled the defense the way he did. And it worked pretty well. But what that was susceptible to is that if you had good quarterbacks, they knew how to diagnose it and they knew who to throw to if that happened. So what it did is it gave you less time to throw the ball. So maybe like 1 second or 2 seconds. But essentially what would happen is if you did get the ball off, we were susceptible to a really big play, sometimes touchdowns. And that's kind of what he worked with, is that you need to have two of the best man coverage corners, which he did. Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, they were a great duo. You needed to have press man coverage corners to follow the receivers for long enough so that your blitz would get there. And what Vic Fangio is trying to run is that we're not going to blitz very much. We're going to send probably 4, maybe 5, depending on what type of offensive set you're running. And you're going to allow your players to move around so much so that the quarterback can't diagnose what he's trying to throw at. And then also have outside linebackers. So essentially what the priority is for this defense, you need one middle linebacker that is a stud. We don't have that right now, so we're probably going to get that. You need 2 safeties. He primarily uses 2 safeties to disguise every coverage. So you need 2 very athletic, very smart safeties to allow you to move around the field and cover everybody. And then, which Javon Holland, I think, will have an amazing year under Vic Fangio. And then what you also need is you need outside linebackers and pass rushers that can win their one-on-ones. Because what you're essentially doing is you're trying to set it up to have a mismatch for your outside linebackers to get to the quarterback, and you're trying to disguise stuff in a way that the quarterback can't get the ball out quick, so that your pass rushers can get to the quarterback. Which, what that is doing is, when you're setting up a blanket deep coverage wise, you're not allowing them to throw the ball deep or just get the ball out. You have to basically analyze the coverage quickly in your head and know where the gap is in the zone defense. And we're going to run a lot of zone. There are, different types of combinations that we'll run, where he'll maybe move a linebacker into zone, and then he'll have the corners covering, and then he'll have the safety playing zone. But for the most part, we're using a lot of zone. He also likes to do combination coverages like cover 6, which is essentially cover 2 and cover 4 put together. So you have one side of the field that is a deep safety zone middle area and then a flat, and then you'll have 2 deep and then a middle area on the other side. So it's very confusing, like what you're trying to get when you're offensively playing this defense. Long story short, there's a lot you can diagnose, and this is, like a beginner trying to explain to you how this whole defense works, but this defense is very complicated, and it has been used by multiple coaches. It's been used by multiple teams and in multiple big scenarios, like the Rams Super Bowl, when it was the lowest scoring Super Bowl, or the 49ers, or when the Bears were the number 1 defense. And it's just been used everywhere, because it is just one of those things that sometimes patience, especially in football when everything's happening so fast, is hard to have. And it makes you just get worn down by trying to figure out what the defense is doing. It's going to be awesome to watch. And I can't wait to see what players, we're going to talk about that later on, what players we need to get. And, because we do need a free safety. Brandon Jones is not really going to be part of the scheme because he can't play coverage. Might be using like Jack or Will linebacker sets. We need a middle linebacker. I think the defensive line is pretty solid for right now. I mean, we have every player that we need on the line. We just need a middle linebacker and a free safety for this defense to really take hold, which we'll see what happens. We'll make some videos on that. But in essence, hope you have a great rest of your day. Fins up. Peace.